Welcome to Faith and Freedom. For the next few minutes, we hope to inform, inspire, and encourage you as we discuss the legal victories and challenges to your fundamental freedoms and religious liberties. Faith and Freedom comes to you from Liberty Counsel, a civil liberties, education, and legal defense organization. Join us now as Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, explains the latest legal issues all across this country. In the courtrooms of America, Liberty Counsel is winning the battle for your constitutional freedoms.
The Supreme Court has taken a historic case on Obamacare. I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Joining me is Shawn Akers, vice president of Middle Eastern Affairs for Liberty Counsel. Shawn, the Supreme Court has stepped right in the midst of this Obamacare case. We knew that they would, and that this case was ultimately destined to be heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm glad that the court stepped into the case and that we will ultimately have a decision by the High Court no later than the end of June of 2012. My prayer is, however, that the court does the right thing and strikes it down because it's an unprecedented power grab by the federal government.
You know, there's no doubt, Matt, in all of the legislation that we've seen in recent years, there is none that goes as far as this one does to bring levels of power to the federal government to reach into the ordinary lives of ordinary people and dictate some of the most intimate decisions, including whether or not and to what extent and what kind of health insurance you're going to be required by the federal government to buy unless the Supreme Court acts.
And, you know, it's so arbitrary in terms of what that health insurance product looks like because it's basically at the discretion of the Secretary of the Health and Human Services, which is Kathleen Sebelius, former governor of Kansas, who was a strong and is a strong supporter of Planned Parenthood and also was a strong supporter of the late Dr. Tiller. There's a lot of discretion that the legislation has given to that secretary, whether it's Sebelius or whoever else after her, to be able to give arbitrary decisions as to what this needs to look like. And so there's a lot of employers that are simply not hiring because they do not know what the impact of Obamacare will be on their businesses. And they're concerned and they can't predict the cost that the businesses will incur. And consequently, it's hard to know whether you can expand without knowing you're going to be hit by this huge Obamacare bill down the road. You know,
Matt, there's utopian ideas always require a government to force you to buy things that you don't want. It's a form of redistribution. And in this case, we've got two different levels of that. One is whether you're going to buy insurance or not at all, and both privately and as employers. But the second is what type of insurance and what that includes. And what the government is really doing here in a very real sense is making you buy levels of insurance that you don't need so that they can spread the risk out and force everyone to buy a one-size-fits-all type of policy to even out the risk for the insurance providers. In the real world, it works just like everything else in utopian socialist ideas, that while they sell you the idea of steak, you wind up in bread lines hoping there's something left over at the end.
Well, in fact, the court is deciding to review all of the issues in this case. It's a very complicated situation because it's unprecedented. They're going to review whether the Anti-Injunction Act requires this case to be delayed until the tax, the penalty, as the statute calls it, is paid until 2014, 2015. I think the court will ultimately find that it doesn't and that the challenge can go forth now. That's the Department of Justice's position. And as it relates to the states out of Florida, I don't think it applies to the states anyway. They're not taxpayers. They're going to decide whether the individual mandate exceeds the authority of Congress under the Constitution. They'll decide whether the Medicaid changes exceed Congress's authority. And that's an interesting question because essentially what they have done is they have not allowed the states to make an informed choice as to whether to accept or not accept the federal Medicaid funding. Why? Because the states don't know what that cost will be, and they don't know what the restrictions will be. So in other words, you have people on both sides of the bargain. If someone gives you an offer, you know what that offer is. You can accept it. You can clearly reject it and go your own way. But if you accept it, you have to live by the terms of the bargain. What the states are arguing is they entered into a bargain, a relationship, contractual relationship, so to speak, with the federal government a number of years ago to accept Medicaid. They operated under a certain set of principles. Now what they're doing is they're radically changing those principles but we don't know the impact of them because there's so much discretion left in the Secretary of Health and Human Services to change the rules. Consequently, you're telling us that we have to take this, but we don't know what we're getting. And therefore, the government has gone too far to force the states into an untenable position. Finally, they're going to also determine whether or not, if the individual mandate or Medicaid are struck down, can the rest of the law survive, or does the entire thing become unconstitutional? I think it's clearly all unconstitutional.
You know, Matt, this is frightening on a couple of levels. One, with the Medicaid, is it does raise real question as to whether federalism would make any sense at all in the wake of a decision that upheld this.
Really wouldn't after this case. There would really be no more limited federal government as it relates to the states. States' rights would become essentially a nullity.
And the other that you've pointed out is that the person, the individual, the personality, Kathleen Sebelius, that would be very much at the helm of these decisions, is an ideologue. She's not a middle-of-the-ground, a middle-of-the-road person that's got some level-headed interest. She is an activist and an ideologue that would result, by any stretch of the imagination, in great liberal social change for the United States through this policy.
Yeah, no question about that. You know, the question about the individual mandate, there's really three different aspects of this law. There's the two aspects that require the mandate. The first is covering pre-existing conditions. The second is eliminating insurance companies' ability to do what's called community rating. Insurance companies look at communities, they look at different kinds of ages, they look at health, demographics, and so forth in order to balance their risk. What kinds of things are we going to cover? What kinds of things are we not going to cover? Can we afford to give this kind of insurance? And so they have to do what's called community rating to balance their risk. ObamaCare eliminated both of those so that all pre-existing conditions are covered and you have no longer the ability to do community rating. What that does is it expands the coverage. Now, 7 states tried to do that, and 7 states failed, and they essentially bankrupted their insurance companies, and they fled the states. An 8th state tried it, but they added a third prong, Massachusetts, so-called ObamaCare. They had the pre-existing coverage, the elimination of the community rating system, and then they added the forced mandate. That's ObamaCare. That's Massachusetts. Now, ObamaCare is patterned after ObamaCare. It's ObamaCare on steroids, so to speak.
That's right.
If the individual mandate is struck down, you have to strike down the rest of the law. If you do not strike down the rest of the law, then you'll have this big coverage pool, but nothing to fund it, and therefore the entire national insurance system will implode.
Matt, doesn't that in many ways bring up in the mind the pictures of the pyramid schemes that have to have an ever-expanding base in order?
Yeah, it's a Ponzi scheme. You don't have anything coming in the front door, so therefore you end up running out of cash.
So we have to force people to make this work. We have the individual mandate is absolutely necessary because you have to force people that don't need the product to buy it to support the full structure of the program.
That's right. And even the federal government has argued that this is central to the entire issue. And without this, the rest of the mechanism wouldn't work. It basically, you have a car with no engine in it. And it may look like a car, but it's not going to act like a car. And in this particular case, it may look like you're originally getting some broader coverage, but ultimately it implodes the system. If it implodes the system, then government rushes in as the savior, and now you have a single-payer nationalized healthcare system. Very
quickly, you've also done a lot of work on the Anti-Injunction Act, and this is another very illogical approach. You know, most of us, if we see a train coming, we'd really like a remedy that would help us to get out of the way rather than waiting until the train strikes before we seek a remedy. Can you explain to us what the problem is with the Anti-Injunction Act?
Well, not in 90 seconds or so, but we can certainly say that I think with this Anti-Injunction Act being argued on the states' side, it clearly, I think, doesn't apply to states because states are not taxpayers. They're not seeking to restrain the imposition of a tax or a penalty by the IRS. So I think this is a good move that it'll be argued as it relates to the states. I think what we will have is a significant decision in 2012. Liberty Counsel has been right in the middle of this case from the very beginning. And we are in the process of preparing significant briefs that we will file later with the United States Supreme Court. Argument will be conducted early 2012, a decision no later than June of 2012. Continue to keep this case in your prayers and also help Liberty Counsel on this case to be able to fight for your liberty. You can contribute to Liberty Counsel online by going to lc.org. You can also order the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. We call it the Patriot's Handbook on American Liberty. You can order that online at lc.org or call us at 1-800-671-1776.
You have been listening to Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel. We hope that we have motivated you to stand up for your faith, family, and freedoms. We can accomplish a lot when we work together. Get informed and get involved today. Sign up for our free monthly newsletter, The Liberator. We will send it out to you free of charge. Stay informed with our Liberty Alert email updates. Just click on the website at www.lc.org or call us at 1-800-671-1776. Tune in next time to learn more about your rights right here on Faith and Freedom.